Emma was excited when she first joined her husband's family dinners. She had only been married for a short while, and she wanted to make a good impression on everyone. The table was always filled with warm food, laughter, and polite conversations. Her mother-in-law would proudly bring out dishes that had been cooked for hours, and her father-in-law would pour drinks for everyone. Emma smiled, ate, and tried to fit into this new part of her life. But something strange happened the first night she ate there. After finishing her meal, Emma felt her stomach twisting. At first, she thought maybe she had eaten too much or too quickly. Her head began to feel heavy, her skin felt cold, and before long, she excused herself to the bathroom. She sat there for a long time, feeling waves of sickness wash over her. She didn't want to cause a scene, so when she returned to the table, she forced a weak smile and said she was just tired. When she got home that night, she still didn't feel right. Her husband told her not to worry. It's just the change of food. My mom uses a lot of spices. Maybe your body isn't used to it yet. Emma nodded, trying to believe him. After all, it was her first family dinner. Maybe he was right. Oh, maybe. It was only her nerves or the excitement of being around so many new relatives. The next time she was invited over, Emma was cautious. She thought to herself, maybe if I eat slowly, I won't feel sick again. She sat down at the table, smiled at her mother-in-law's compliments, and tasted a little bit of everything. The food smelled delicious, and everyone praised the cooking. But within an hour of eating, the same feeling returned. Her stomach clenched, her throat felt dry, and sweat formed on her forehead. Emma excused herself again, trying not to show how much she was struggling. This time, when she got home, she lay down on the bed, unable to sleep. Her mind started to worry. Why was this happening again? She had eaten at restaurants, at her own home, and even at friends' houses, but she had never felt this way before. Only at her in-laws' home did this strange sickness take hold of her. Still, she didn't want to say anything. She was new in the family, and she didn't want to look rude or ungrateful. Her husband kept saying it was just her body adjusting. Emma wanted to believe him, but a small voice in her mind whispered, something is not right. The third dinner made things worse. Emma promised herself she would only eat a little. She put small portions on her plate, smiled politely, and tried to focus on the conversation instead of the food. But the sickness didn't care how much she ate. Once again, her stomach churned, and she had to grip the edge of the chair to steady herself. Her face turned pale, and her hands shook. Her mother-in-law looked at her and asked if she was okay, and Emma forced another weak smile, saying she just felt tired again. Inside, she was frightened. 3 times in a row, she had gotten sick at the same place. 3 times she had walked away from the dinner table, feeling weaker and more worried. Her husband reassured her again, but she noticed the way he frowned when he looked at her pale face. She could tell he was beginning to wonder too, even if he didn't say it. On the way home, Emma stared out of the car window, her thoughts racing. Could it really just be the food not agreeing with her? Or was there something else happening that she couldn't see? She replayed the meals in her mind, thinking about the flavors, the dishes, and how she had eaten. Nothing stood out. Everything seemed normal, but her body told her a different story. That night, lying awake in bed, Emma promised herself she would pay closer attention next time. She would watch carefully. She would notice details she had missed before. And she would not let her fear be brushed aside again. Something was wrong, and if no one else was going to figure it out, she would have to do it herself. The first sickness had been brushed off as nerves. The second time, she thought maybe it was her body adjusting. But after the third time, Emma knew deep down that this was not a coincidence. Each dinner was like a warning sign, a puzzle she didn't yet know how to solve. And though her husband tried to comfort her, Emma could feel the heavy weight of dread growing inside her. She didn't know what the truth was yet, but she knew one thing for certain. The next family dinner might give her the answer she needed, or the sickness would only get worse. Asterisk, after several dinners at her in-laws' home, Emma began to notice the strange pattern more clearly. Every time she ate at their dinner table, the same thing happened. The food looked beautiful, the dishes were filled with flavor, and the family always spoke with smiles and laughter. But once Emma finished her meal, her stomach twisted, her head felt light, and she spent the rest of the night sick. At first, she wanted to believe it was just her body not adjusting. But by now, she couldn't deny it. This was no accident. The thought kept echoing in her head. Why only here? Why only at my in-laws' home? She tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was the spices her mother-in-law used. Maybe it was the oil. Maybe it was even allergies she had never noticed before. But if that were true, wouldn't she feel sick when she cooked with the same ingredients at home? She had used the same spices once in her own kitchen, and nothing happened. That's when the uneasiness inside her grew stronger. The next time she was invited, Emma entered the house with nervous eyes. She wanted to appear normal, but her mind was racing. She sat at the table, looking at the steaming dishes placed in front of her, as her mother-in-law served her food. Emma noticed something subtle. A quick glance passed between her sister-in-law and her mother-in-law. It lasted only a second, but it sent a shiver down Emma's spine. She tried to push the thought away, telling herself she was being paranoid. But as she lifted the spoon to her mouth, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The food tasted fine, delicious even, but her mind was no longer at ease. Later that night, as expected, the sickness returned. Her stomach cramped so badly she could hardly stand. She spent hours curled up on the bed, tears stinging her eyes. Her husband rubbed her back, insisting again, "It must just be the food not sitting well with you." But Emma wasn't satisfied with that answer anymore. This was not just bad digestion. This was something more. Over the next few days, she found herself replaying the dinners in her mind. The way her plate was always the first one served. The way her in-laws encouraged her to eat more. The way her sister-in-law smiled too sweetly, as if watching her carefully. None of it seemed unusual at the time. But now the pieces felt like they didn't fit together. Emma started experimenting quietly. She ate very little at one dinner, just a spoonful of rice and a sip of soup. Still, she felt sick. At the next dinner, she skipped the meat entirely, thinking maybe that was the cause. But once again, her body betrayed her. The sickness returned, stronger than before. By now, her suspicion had grown into fear. What was happening to her at these dinners? Was it possible someone was doing something to the food? The thought terrified her, but it also made her angry. Why would anyone want to harm her? She had done nothing wrong. She had tried so hard to be polite, kind, and respectful. One evening, while lying in bed and holding her aching stomach, Emma whispered to herself, "No, this can't just be food. Someone doesn't want me here." The idea haunted her. She thought of her sister-in-law, the way she often made sharp comments hidden behind a smile. The way she sometimes rolled her eyes when Emma spoke. Could it be jealousy? Could it be resentment that Emma had married into the family? Emma didn't want to accuse anyone without proof, but she knew she couldn't keep suffering like this. She decided that at the next dinner, she would be more careful. She wouldn't just eat blindly. She would watch. She would notice. And most importantly, she would protect herself. When the day came, Emma walked into the in-laws' house with her heart beating fast. She smiled politely, pretending everything was normal, but inside, she was alert. As the food was served, she paid close attention. She saw how her plate was prepared differently. With her portion placed carefully in front of her before anyone else's, she noticed the subtle look her sister-in-law gave when Emma took her first bite. This time, instead of eating quickly, Emma pretended to take small bites. She moved her food around her plate, making it look like she was eating more than she actually was. And as the dinner went on, she noticed something strange. Her sickness didn't come as quickly. Asterisk when the night ended and she returned home. She still felt uneasy, but not as sick as before. That one small change confirmed her growing suspicion. Something was definitely not right with the food being given to her. Lying in bed, Emma's thoughts swirled. I can't keep doing this. I need to find out the truth. If I keep eating at their table, this sickness will never end. But how can I prove it? Her heart was heavy, but her mind was sharp. She knew one thing for certain. Now her suspicion was no longer just a thought. It was real. Something or someone was making her sick, and she would not stop until she found out why. Emma tried to hide her worries, but her husband, Daniel, could see the change in her. She wasn't the same cheerful woman who once looked forward to family gatherings. Now, whenever an invitation came from his parents, Emma's smile faded, and her eyes darkened with dread. She still went, still sat at the dinner table, but Daniel noticed how stiff her posture was, how carefully she picked at her food, and how pale she looked by the end of the night. At first, he believed his own explanations. He told himself it was nothing serious, maybe just stress, maybe the spices, maybe Emma was nervous about adjusting to a new family. But when the sickness continued, when it happened again and again, even Daniel began to feel uneasy. One night, after Emma returned home doubled over in pain, he sat beside her on the bed. "Emma," he said softly, brushing her hair from her face, "are you sure this isn't just something in your head?" His words pierced her heart. She looked at him with wide, hurt eyes. "You think I'm imagining this? That I'm making myself sick on purpose?" Daniel frowned, rubbing his forehead. No, that's not what I mean. But maybe your body is reacting to stress. My family would never. They would never do anything to hurt you." Emma turned away, tears burning her eyes. It wasn't the first time he had said those words, but this time they stung more deeply. She wanted him to believe her, to stand by her, but instead, he was protecting his family's honor. For days, tension grew between them. Emma became quieter, keeping her suspicions locked inside. She feared that if she spoke openly, he would accuse her of being paranoid or disrespectful. Yet inside, the unease only grew stronger. At the next dinner, Emma felt her nerves shaking like fragile glass. She tried to refuse politely, saying she wasn't hungry, but her mother-in-law insisted. "Oh dear, you must eat. I've cooked so much and you're part of this family now. Don't be shy." Daniel gave her an encouraging look, urging her to eat. Under the pressure of everyone's eyes, Emma forced herself to take a few bites. The taste was good, but her hands trembled as she held the fork. All the while, she felt Daniel's gaze on her watching, worried, but still doubtful. Later that night, when the sickness returned full force, Daniel finally sighed in frustration. "Emma, this can't go on. You can't keep getting sick like this. Maybe we should see a doctor. Maybe it's an allergy." Emma shook her head weakly. "Daniel, don't you see? I only get sick there. Only at your parents' house. Nowhere else. Don't you think that's strange?" Her words hung heavy. In the room, Daniel didn't answer right away. He wanted to protect her, but he also wanted to protect his family. The idea that someone in his home could be hurting his wife was too painful to believe. He shook his head, forcing a small smile. "It must be something else. My mom, my sister. They love you, Emma. You're imagining something that isn't there." Those words broke something inside her. She wanted to scream, to beg him to believe her, but she stayed silent. She realized that no matter how many times she suffered, he would always choose denial. He loved her, yes, but he couldn't bring himself to see the truth. The following week, Daniel confronted her again. "Emma, you need to stop thinking this way. My family is not against you. If you go in with fear, of course you'll feel sick. It's your mind creating the problem." Emma felt her heart sink. Not only did he doubt her, but now he was blaming her. She sat in silence, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. While inside, she thought, "If no one will believe me, then I'll have to find out the truth on my own." That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept peacefully beside her. She thought of the glances, the way her plate was always served first, the way her sister-in-law watched her. All the small details formed a picture in her mind. It wasn't just coincidence. Something was happening, something she couldn't yet prove. Daniel's doubt hurt her more than the sickness itself. She wanted his support, his faith, his strength beside her. But instead, she felt alone, fighting a battle no one else could see. And yet, within that loneliness, a fire began to burn. If her husband wouldn't believe her, then she would have to gather her own proof. She would watch, she would wait, and she would not let herself be fooled again. Emma closed her eyes that night, single tear sliding down her cheek. But her heart whispered a promise. One day, Daniel will see the truth. And when that day comes, he will regret ever doubting me. Emma knew she couldn't rely on anyone else anymore. Her husband doubted her, her in-laws treated her sickness like nothing. And each dinner left her weaker and more afraid. But deep inside, she also felt a new determination. If no one would stand with her, then she would stand for herself. She decided that the next family dinner wouldn't just be another painful night, it would be her chance to watch closely, to see things she had missed before. No one would know what she was doing. She would smile, nod, and laugh like normal, but her eyes would be sharp, and her mind would record every detail that the evening came faster than she expected. Emma dressed carefully, forcing herself to look calm, even though her heart was pounding. As she entered the in-laws' house, she greeted everyone politely. The smell of food filled the air, rich spices, roasted meat, and fresh bread. To anyone else, it might have been comforting. To Emma, it felt like the scent of danger. She sat down at the table, pretending to relax. The dishes were passed around, the clinking of spoons and chatter of family filling the room. But Emma's focus wasn't on the conversations anymore. She watched the hands that served the food. She noticed how her plate was always placed first in front of her, even before the elders. Her mother-in-law smiled warmly as she scooped food onto Emma's plate. "Eat, dear. You're too thin," she said kindly. But Emma caught the slight twitch in her sister-in-law's lips, the tiniest smirk, as if she were waiting for something. Emma's stomach tightened, but she kept her face calm. She picked up her fork, but instead of eating right away, she pretended to listen to the story her father-in-law was telling. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her sister-in-law glance at her plate, not at anyone else's. That small detail made her suspicion stronger. Why was her plate the one that drew so much attention? Emma decided to test things quietly. She shifted a few pieces of food from her plate onto her husband's when no one was looking. She did it smoothly, hiding it with a napkin. Daniel didn't notice he was busy laughing at a joke. Minutes passed, and Emma only pretended to eat. She lifted her fork, moved food around, and chewed small bites without swallowing too much. She wanted to see what would happen by the end of dinner. She felt only mild discomfort, nothing like the severe sickness she usually experienced. But Daniel complained later that night of an upset stomach. Nothing serious, but enough to make him lie down early. Emma's heart raced when she realized what it meant. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't just her body reacting strangely. Something on her plate was different. The next dinner, she continued her silent observation. She noticed how her sister-in-law lingered near the serving dishes. whispering something to her mother-in-law before sitting down. She noticed how the salt shaker was placed closer to her than anyone else. Small things easy to ignore, but together they painted a troubling picture. Emma's mind worked carefully. She couldn't accuse anyone without proof, is she? Spoke too soon, her husband would think she was attacking his family again. But if she stayed silent forever, she would keep suffering. That night, when everyone was busy talking, she excused herself to the bathroom but didn't go far. Instead, she quietly stood near the hallway, listening. She heard her sister-in-law's voice whisper. She ate it again. "Did you see?" Followed by a soft laugh. Emma's blood turned cold. She couldn't hear the rest, but those words were enough to make her certain something was being done to her food. When she returned to the table, she forced a smile, though her hands trembled. She ate even less than before, letting most of her food sit untouched. She noticed the disappointment flicker across her sister-in-law's face. That tiny reaction told Emma more than words ever could. By the end of the evening, Emma was quiet but thoughtful. She knew she was being watched. She knew her plate was being tampered with. And she knew her suspicion had turned into something undeniable. But she also knew she needed to be clever. Exposing the truth wouldn't be easy. She needed proof, something no one could deny. And for that, she would have to take a step no one expected. She would have to change the game, bring her own food, watch the results, and finally uncover what had been hidden in plain sight. As she left the in-laws' house that night, Emma's face looked calm, but inside, her heart was heavy with a secret plan. She whispered to herself in the dark, "Next time, it won't be their food I eat. Next time, I'll know the truth." The decision came to Emma slowly, like a storm forming on the horizon. For weeks, she had watched silently, pretending not to notice the strange looks, the careful way her plate was always handled, the whispers that floated through the kitchen. When she wasn't near, she had endured night after night of sickness, and she had endured the painful doubt in her husband's eyes. But now she was done with silence. She could no longer sit at that table like a helpless guest. The idea first struck her while she was lying awake one night, her stomach aching after another dinner at her in-laws. If the problem was always in the food given to her, then the answer was simple: don't eat their food. But it wasn't enough just to refuse. That would make her look rude, ungrateful, and suspicious. Her mother-in-law would insist she eat, and her husband would pressure her to be polite. No, Emma realized she needed a plan that looked normal on the outside, but gave her full control inside. And so she whispered to herself in the darkness, "Next time, I will bring my own dish." The idea gave her both courage and fear. Courage, because it meant she could finally test the truth for herself. Fear, because she knew her in-laws would raise questions. Still, she was determined. When the next family dinner invitation came, Emma smiled politely and said, "Oh, I'd love to command. I'll bring something special. I want to contribute to the meal." Her mother-in-law hesitated for a second, then forced a smile. "Of course, dear. That's very thoughtful of you." But Emma caught a flash of something in her eyes, something that wasn't quite happiness. On the day of the dinner, Emma carefully prepared her dish. She cooked it slowly, making sure it smelled and looked delicious. She wanted no excuse for anyone to refuse it. It wasn't just food, it was her shield, her weapon, her proof. As she placed it in a clean container and wrapped it tightly, her hands shook with both fear and determination when Emma and Daniel arrived. The table was already full of food, steaming and fragrant. Her mother-in-law greeted her warmly, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her sister-in-law's gaze flickered to the dish in Emma's hands, narrowing slightly. "I thought I'd bring something today," Emma said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I wanted to share this with everyone." She placed the dish on the table, and for a brief moment, Silence filled the room. Then her father-in-law laughed and said, "That's wonderful, Emma. It looks delicious." The others nodded, though Emma could feel the tension quietly thickening in the air. As everyone began to eat, Emma served herself only from her own dish. She smiled politely when her mother-in-law offered her other food. "Thank you, but I really want you all to taste this. I made it just for today," she said sweetly. It was the perfect excuse, one no one could challenge without looking rude. The meal went on as usual. Laughter, stories, and clinking spoons filled the air. But Emma's heart was pounding in her chest. Every bite she took from her own food felt like a test. Every glance from across the table felt like a warning. Her sister-in-law kept watching her, eyes sharp, lips pressed tightly together. An hour passed. Normally, by this time, the sickness would have already started. The twisting stomach, the waves of nausea, the weakness that sent her running to the bathroom. But tonight, she felt fine. Her body was calm. Her hands weren't trembling. Inside, relief and terror mixed together. Relief because she finally knew the truth. It was the food from her in-laws that was making her sick. Terror because this meant her darkest suspicion was correct. Someone was deliberately doing this to her. She looked at her husband, who was happily eating from all the dishes without noticing anything wrong. She wanted to tell him right then, to shout across the table, "Look, I'm fine because I didn't eat their food." But she held her tongue. She knew she needed more than just her words. She needed him to see it for himself. As the dinner ended, Emma felt a strange strength rising inside her. For the first time, she wasn't the victim of the sickness. For the first time, she had beaten it. She smiled politely, thanked her in-laws, and carried herself with quiet confidence as they left the house. That night, when she lay in bed, she felt no pain. Her body was strong, her stomach calm. She stared at the ceiling, whispering softly, "It's true. I was right all along," but the victory was only the beginning. Now that she had proof for herself, the question grew louder in her mind. Who was doing this, and why? Emma knew that the bold decision to bring her own dish had changed everything. She had taken the first step toward uncovering the truth, but the next steps would be even harder. She would need to dig deeper, to face the painful reality that someone in that house wanted to hurt her. For the first time in weeks, Emma closed her eyes and slept peacefully, though a storm of questions waited for her in the morning. She had escaped the sickness this time, but she hadn't escaped the danger. The truth was closer than ever, and so was the confrontation she could no longer avoid. The night Emma brought her own dish had changed everything. For the first time in weeks, she returned home without pain, without sickness, twisting her stomach. She lay in bed that night with her eyes wide open, her thoughts spinning faster than ever. The proof was clear. She had eaten only her food, and she was fine. All those other nights, she had trusted what was placed in front of her. And every time, it made her ill. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't her imagination. Something was happening at that dinner table. But Emma knew she couldn't just stop there. If she told Daniel now, he would shake his head and say she was exaggerating. He would remind her that his family loved her, that no one in that house would ever wish her harm. And maybe he would even accuse her of insulting his mother and sister. No, she needed more. She needed evidence he couldn't deny. The next week, another dinner invitation came. Emma's hands trembled as she held the phone, but she forced her voice to sound cheerful. "Of course, we'll be there," she said. This time, though, she prepared not one dish, but two. The first was the food she would eat. The second was for testing. She carefully planned it. At dinner, she would make it seem like she was eating the family's food, but secretly, she would avoid it. And later, she would watch closely who got sick, who didn't, and what small reactions gave the truth away. That evening, as she placed her dishes on the table, she caught the sharp glance her sister-in-law threw at her. It wasn't long, just a flicker, but it was enough. A strange uneasiness lingered in the air, like storm clouds gathering. Dinner began, and once again, her plate was served first. Emma noticed every detail now: the way her mother-in-law leaned close to her dish, the way her sister-in-law whispered as she sat down. Her heart pounded, but she kept her face calm, smiling politely as if nothing was wrong. She served herself from her own food, but pretended to eat from theirs. She moved the food around on her plate, lifting it with her fork and letting it fall back again. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed her sister-in-law watching her with strange intensity. As if waiting for something, the minutes ticked by. Normally, by now, the sickness would have begun creeping in: tightness in her stomach, dizziness, cold sweat. But Emma felt fine, calm, healthy. Then something happened that made her blood run cold. Daniel leaned over and casually took a bite from her plate. She hadn't stopped him in time, and now he had eaten a piece of food that wasn't hers. Emma froze. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone at the table could hear it. She wanted to scream, to grab his hand, to tell him no, but it was too late. Later that night, while Emma felt perfectly fine, Daniel began to complain of discomfort. He rubbed his stomach, wincing. "Strange," he muttered. "I think I ate too much." Emma stared at him, her face pale. It wasn't overeating, it was the food. For the first time, someone else had felt a tand that someone was her husband. She didn't say anything right away. She helped him lie down, brought him water, and stayed by his side. But inside, her thoughts were on fire. Now he will know. Now he will see it isn't just me. The next morning, when Daniel was still sluggish and weak, Emma finally spoke. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "Do you see now? I didn't get sick. You did. Because you ate what they gave me." Daniel looked at her, his eyes uncertain. Slowly, doubt gave way to realization. He remembered the nights she had clutched her stomach in pain, the times she had grown pale and shaken. He remembered dismissing her fears, telling her it was nothing. But now, with his own body aching, he couldn't deny it anymore. Still, the question hung heavy in the room. Why? Who would do such a thing? Emma's suspicion turned toward her sister-in-law. She thought of the smirks, the glances, the whispers. It was always there, just beneath the surface. She wanted to believe her mother-in-law couldn't be part of something so cruel. But the way they exchanged looks haunted her. Later that week, Emma acted bolder. She excused herself from the dinner table and quietly doubled back to the kitchen. There, hidden behind the doorway, she saw her sister-in-law hovering over the plates, sprinkling something from a small container into the food meant for her. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled. Her eyes widened, but she didn't move. She stood frozen, watching as the truth unfolded before her eyes. The shock was unbearable. Her suspicion had become reality. Her sister-in-law had been tampering with her food, poisoning her night after night. The betrayal burned deep in her chest. She didn't confront her right then. Not yet. Instead, she returned to the table quietly, her mind racing. She had seen enough. She finally had the truth. That night, as Emma lay awake beside her husband, she knew her life would never be the same. The sickness had been solved. The whispers, the stares, the secret smirks, they all made sense now. But knowing the truth was only the beginning. The hardest part still lay ahead, telling Daniel, confronting the family, and demanding justice for what had been done to her. Asterisk. Emma couldn't erase the image from her mind, the sight of her sister-in-law leaning over her plate, sprinkling something unseen but deadly. That small act explained months of pain, nights of sickness, and the constant fear that had haunted her. She had uncovered the truth, but truth alone was not enough. Now she needed to understand why. The question gnawed at her heart. Why would her own family by marriage want to hurt her? What had she done to deserve such cruelty? Emma turned the thought over and over in her mind. Searching for answers, she began watching her sister-in-law more carefully, not just at dinner, but during visits, conversations, and even the smallest interactions. She noticed things she hadn't paid attention to before: the sharp tone hidden beneath polite words, the way her sister-in-law's eyes hardened whenever Daniel showed Emma affection, the way she sometimes whispered to her mother when she thought Emma wasn't listening. One afternoon, while Emma was helping clean the kitchen after lunch, she overheard a hushed conversation. Her sister-in-law's voice was bitter. "She doesn't belong here. Ever since she came, everything has changed. Daniel barely listens to us anymore. She's taken him away." Emma froze where she stood, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Her mother-in-law's reply was softer, hesitant. "Don't say such things. She's his wife now. You must accept it." But the sister-in-law snapped back, her words dripping with resentment. "Accept it? She's ruining everything. She gets his attention, his love, his respect. What about me? What about us? She doesn't deserve to sit at this table like she belongs." Emma's heart sank. The motive was jealousy, deep, poisonous jealousy. Her sister-in-law couldn't stand that Daniel loved Emma more than anyone else, that his loyalty had shifted to his new wife. To her, Emma wasn't just a new family member, she was a rival, a thief who had stolen her brother's devotion. That night, Emma lay awake with tears in her eyes. The realization cut deeper than the sickness ever had. It wasn't about food or tradition or misunderstandings. It was hatred, born out of envy, and it was directed solely at her. She remembered moments from the past, how her sister-in-law had once laughed when Emma dropped a spoon, how she had made comments about Emma's simple ways, how she had rolled her eyes when Daniel complimented Emma's cooking. All those small insults now pieced together into a picture of bitterness and resentment that had been growing for months. Emma wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, to shout, "Why are you doing this to me?" But she knew a direct fight would only lead to denial, lies, and more doubt from her husband. She needed Daniel to see it for himself. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. At the next family dinner, Emma again brought her own dish. This time, she encouraged Daniel to eat mostly from it too. As usual, her sister-in-law watched with sharp eyes, frustration flickering across her face when Emma avoided the family's food. After the meal, Daniel commented lightly, "Strange. You're not sick tonight." He meant it as a casual remark, but Emma saw the doubt beginning to fade in his eyes. She stayed quiet, letting the silence work in her favor. Later, when they returned home, Emma finally told him everything: the glances, the whispers, the way she had pretended to eat, and finally, what she had witnessed in the kitchen. At first, Daniel's face turned pale, disbelief written all over it. "No, my sister wouldn't," he began, but then he stopped. He remembered his own night of sickness when he ate from her plate, and the look on Emma's face as she told her story. Slowly, painfully, the truth sank into him. His sister, the one he had trusted all his life, had been poisoning his wife out of jealousy. The next day, Daniel decided to test it himself. He quietly told Emma to let him handle it. At dinner, he switched plates without anyone noticing. That night, he was the one who grew sick again, and that was all the proof he needed. When he confronted his sister, the truth spilled out like venom. At first, she denied it, her face red with anger. But under his furious questioning, her mask slipped. She shouted through tears, "You don't understand. Ever since she came, you've changed. You don't care about us anymore." Everything is about her. I just wanted her gone." Her words left the room in stunned silence. Emma's heart ached, not just from betrayal, but from the cruelty of it all. She had tried so hard to fit in, to be kind, to love this family as her own, and yet she had been seen only as a threat. For Daniel, the betrayal was unbearable. He looked at his sister with eyes filled with sorrow and anger. "You could have killed her," he said quietly. "The woman I love, my wife. How could you do this?" No one at the table had an answer. The weight of the hidden motive, the jealousy, the hatred, the selfishness hung heavy in the room. Emma sat silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. She had finally uncovered the truth, but it wasn't the relief she had imagined. Knowing the reason didn't heal the wounds, it only made them deeper. Asterisk. The air inside the dining room was heavy after the confession. No one moved, no one spoke. Emma sat frozen in her chair, her hands resting tightly on her lap. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, but instead of relief, she felt her chest tighten. The people who should have been her family had turned her life into weeks of quiet suffering. Daniel's face was pale, his jaw clenched. He looked at his sister as though he didn't recognize her anymore. "All these nights," he said slowly, his voice shaking, "she suffered. She cried herself to sleep, and I doubted her. I told her it was in her head. And all this time, it was you, my own sister." His sister trembled, her eyes red with angry tears. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to leave. I thought if she got sick enough, she would stop coming." I didn't think. Daniel slammed his fist against the table, making everyone flinch. "You didn't think you could have killed her. You don't understand what you've done. You've broken this family." Emma's mother-in-law sat silently, her face drained of color. She looked at Emma with guilt in her eyes, but no words came. Perhaps she had suspected. Perhaps she had chosen not to see. Now it was too late. The damage was done. Emma felt tears rising in her eyes, but she held them back. She didn't want to cry in front of them anymore. She had spent enough nights weeping in secret, enough nights begging her husband to believe her. Now the truth was clear for all to see. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "I came into this family with love. I wanted to belong, to respect you all, to be a daughter, a sister. But instead, I was treated as an enemy. You fed me poison, and you fed me doubt. And still, I tried to stay silent, because I wanted peace. But now I see. Some people will never accept me, no matter how much I try." The room remained silent. No one dared interrupt her. Emma turned to Daniel, her eyes softening. "And you? You doubted me when I needed you most. Do you know how alone I felt?" Daniel's eyes filled with shame. He reached for her hand, his voice cracking. "Emma, I'm sorry. I was blind. I didn't want to believe my family could hurt you. I chose them over you, and I was wrong. Please, forgive me." Emma looked at him for a long moment. She could see the regret in his eyes, the pain of realizing he had failed her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. "I don't know if I can forget, but I will forgive, because I love you. And because love means giving another chance." Relief washed over his face, but Emma wasn't finished. She turned back to the table, her gaze landing on her sister-in-law. "But as for you, I will not forget. I may forgive for my own peace, but I will never trust you again. You wanted me gone, but I'm still here. And no amount of poison will change that." Her sister-in-law broke down in tears, covering her face with her hands. Whether it was guilt or anger, Emma didn't care anymore. From that night on, things changed. Emma stopped eating anything she hadn't prepared herself. Slowly, Daniel began to distance himself from his sister, choosing his wife's safety over old loyalties. The family gatherings became quieter, more formal, but never the same as before. Trust had been broken, and some wounds could never fully heal. For Emma, it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about finding her voice, her strength. She had entered this family as a polite, quiet woman who wanted nothing but love. But she had been tested, poisoned, doubted, and she had survived. Weeks later, as she sat with Daniel on their porch, watching the evening sky turn golden, she felt a strange sense of peace. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She had faced betrayal, uncovered secrets, and stood strong even when no one believed her. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "I promise, Emma, I'll never doubt you again. You're my family. You're my home." She smiled softly, the wind brushing against her face. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, she realized something powerful. The sickness had tried to break her, but instead it had revealed her strength. The betrayal had scarred her, but it had also shown her who truly stood by her side. She was no longer just a guest at the dinner table. She was a survivor of its darkest secret. The chapter of pain was ending, and a new chapter was beginning. Emma knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer afraid. She had found the truth, she had found her voice, and most of all, she had found the courage to stand tall.